The danger to just focus on the easy questions until you're getting most of those right and then worry about the harder ones is that you're going to be solving the easier ones using methods that don't translate into harder questions. Hey, this is Avi Gutman with another Ask Me Anything event brought to you by quantreasoning.com. I invite you to join me live next time. We do this every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and you can attend for free by starting your free trial at quantreasoning.com. Depends on your target. If your ultimate target is, say, a 650 and you have no interest in ever getting to 700 and up, then it would be a waste of time, although that's also arguable. I'm going to say a lot of conflicting things now, so bear with me. It arguably would be a waste of time to work on 700 level questions if your ultimate target is 650. Why? Because there are easier approaches that would work in easier questions that won't work in hard questions. So if you're never planning to get to 700 level questions, then why learn approaches that are necessary only for those really hard questions when you can use easier approaches such as testing cases and working backwards and things like that? Why bother learning? Why bother improving your reasoning if there are workarounds that will work in easier questions? So that's the argument. The counter argument is the following. Even if your goal is only 650, it's still worthwhile to improve your reasoning because you'll actually need it when you get to business school. Right? So if you think of the GMAT as not just a hurdle to pass, but also a preparation for the rest of your life, then that would be the counter argument, which would say, no, you should focus on improving your reasoning even if your target is low. I don't think that my book is really appropriate for people with a low target. 650 is kind of, I would say, borderline. It's also a bit tricky because my book is just quant and your overall score will depend on your verbal as well. But as a general rule, I would say, look, anyone whose target is 600 and less shouldn't worry about my book unless they want to improve their reasoning for other reasons. But if their target on the GMAT is no higher than 600, they don't need this book. And if you are reading this book, then presumably your target is high, and I haven't talked about that yet. That was the next thing I was going to say, is if your target is, say, 700 or thereabouts or higher, then the danger in the strategy that my former colleague suggested to you, which was to just focus on the easy questions until you're getting most of those right and then worry about the harder ones. The danger is that you're going to be solving the easier ones using methods that don't translate into harder questions. So then you're practicing a habit of using these, what I would call brute force methods. And that's actually going to hurt you when you get to the harder questions, because you're going to try to apply those strategies to these harder questions and you're going to fail. And you're going to waste time and then you're going to run out of time, etc., etc. So the danger is that you're going to be building a habit that's later going to bite you in the ass, and it's going to be really hard to get out of that habit, to get out of the brute force approaches and to get into the reasoning based approaches. So if your eventual target is high, then I would say no, don't differentiate easier ones from harder ones, because you want to be using reasoning based approaches even in the easier ones, because otherwise you're missing an opportunity to improve your reasoning, which you'll need to do if you want to get the harder ones right eventually. When you're at the test center, how do you quickly decide whether to try to just apply reasoning and think deeply about the problem, or fall back to some kind of brute force textbook math type of approach? How do you quickly make that decision? That's a very good question. When you're at home, when you're not at the test center, when you're at home, always start with reasoning. And when you've done that enough times, the intuition will come. Right? Himanshu is saying, how do you build that intuition? The way to build that intuition is to always start with reasoning at home. Always. And if you fail to solve it using reasoning at home, Post it on the forum. Bring it to an AMA. Send me an email. Because there's always a reasoning-based approach. And the fact that you couldn't solve it using reasoning doesn't mean that it can't be solved using reasoning. It just means that your reasoning isn't at that level yet. But reasoning is something that can be developed just like a muscle. And when you get to the test center, you will have had so much experience attempting to use reasoning on every question that you will just know very quickly what to do. And by the way, I would still start at the test center thinking deeply about the story, if it's a word problem, or considering multiple ways to think about an algebraic equation or inequality. Do I want to draw a number line? Or, thinking about things in a deep way and using reasoning regardless. And then sometimes you'll say, hey, you know what? I took my time, I thought deeply about the situation, and I couldn't solve it. Then you ask yourself, okay, is there some textbook math approach that I can fall back on that would get me to an answer in an appropriate amount of time? Most of the time, the answer is probably going to be no, right? There isn't a textbook math approach that will get me to the answer in an appropriate amount of time, and therefore I should just guess and move on, and that's okay. In fact, we're hoping that we'll have to do that on almost half the questions. Almost half the questions should be too hard, unless you're scoring in the high 700s. Half the questions should be too hard, and that's what you're hoping for. If they're not too hard, then you must be making careless mistakes. So keep that in mind as well. But the short answer to your question, Himanshu, is always start with reasoning at home, and the intuition will come with time and practice. If you found this video useful, go to quantreasoning.com for a lot more where that came from. You should also click that like button and let me know in the comments below what you'd like me to make future videos about. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and do that and click that bell below so you get notified about future videos. See you next time.